Hello, everyone. Welcome to Log In Audio Out. This is the Library of Games podcast, and my name is Hugo, and I'm here with my co-host Taylor.
Hello.
Say hi.
I said hi. Hi.
And oh, sorry
A little
about that.
sassy today.
All right, and today we have two very special guests. And Marie, when do you guys say hi?
Hi, my name is Marie Williams. Not sure if I should have said my last name, but I am a future music education teacher. Yeah, and my favorite video game of all time is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time.
Nice.
Yes, very good game.
All right, Ashley.
All right. Hi, my name is Ashley. I'm also a future music educator, and I'm currently obsessed with BioShock because it came out on the Switch, and I've been playing it since it came out.
Awesome. All right. Good choices, you guys. So today we have a very special episode in honor of Pride Month. We're going to be talking on the focus of LGBTQ and minorities and inclusion in the video game community. And honestly, I'm actually really excited for this episode most of all because doing a lot of research and just kind of looking into it, it's a little eye-opening once, like, if you're not on, like, in the inside perspective, or if you're not the target demographic for video games. And it definitely changes your perspective of how you view, like, certain characters or certain choices of how audience kind of perceive them, and also for perspective of the player, because it shows, hey, you guys matter. Everyone matters in terms of playing video games. And so I guess the first question that I kind of want to go into is what's your opinion on the terminology of video games are just catering to the male fantasy? And right now, I guess we'll just start off with Taylor. We'll go one by one and what you guys think about it.
Sure. So I wasn't really aware that there was this bias towards games really being, like, mostly made with a male audience in mind for a lot of my game playing life. I think I tended to play, like, little indie games and adventure games. But I do remember this moment I had, and I will say I am white, straight, cis female, so a lot of the world is made for me. So, but a lot of it isn't because I'm female. And so when I was playing Mass Effect 2, I had this moment, this, like, real clarity moment where I was like, oh, this game isn't made for me. Like, I was not considered as an audience member in this as a female. And I remember that was one of the first moments where I really, like, started to reckon with the fact that, and I think it's mostly AAA titles, where game makers have this, or in the past, I think it's getting a little bit better, not where it needs to be, but this idea that the people that were buying games were young, straight, white men. And so they needed to cater to that. And a lot of that was including male fantasy. And what broke me in Mass Effect 2 was the representation of two female characters in the game. It was just so hypersexualized, and they just were not real at all. And one of them, Jack, wore this, like, weird boob strap thing. And I was like, that's not a piece of clothing that anyone can or should wear. And it totally took me out of the game. And I think that was my first real moment. And that was, that was in my adult life where I had that moment. And I think it pushed me even further into really wanting to play indie games and adventure games and kind of, like, stay away from AAA because I knew that wasn't for me.
Interesting. Okay. Any of you guys, Ashley, Marie, you guys want to jump in?
Yeah. So I don't have like a totally completely same experience, but I have a similar one. So for me, I am in my 20s. I'm Mexican and I am part of the LGBT community, but I've never, when I was a child at least, never thought like, oh, these games aren't meant for me. To be fair, I was playing games like Yoshi's Island, Mario Sunshine, just all of those games where it's like an adventure and it's like anyone can play them and you feel like part of it because sometimes the characters are just like random little creatures, you know? Like who's gonna relate to Yoshi? You know, I feel like we all can, but also we all can't because he's a dinosaur. So I played games like that, and like I remember the closest thing I got to kind of maybe noticing as at those kind of like women stereotypes in video games were like playing games like Tomb Raider or Resident Evil, where the characters were kind of like dressed a little bit more provocatively. But when I was younger, to me that was kind of like, oh, they're really cool and like edgy and all that. Like I just didn't really notice it until I got older. And also once I started to like tell people that I played video games, because growing up my parents sheltered me a lot, as in I never got to play with the neighborhood kids. So I'd be playing Pokemon by myself and all these other games. And it wasn't until like I got a little bit older, maybe end of middle school, going into high school, where I actually started interacting with kids with video games, where I got a lot of like, that game wasn't meant for you, or like you wouldn't know how to play it because you're a girl. And then I was kind of like, oh, maybe they're right. Like maybe I'm not supposed to be playing these games. Like, but I kind of feel like it's for some games. Obviously, there are some games where you can kind of tell that they're making women kind of in the image of men. But overall, I kind of think a lot of video games are kind of up to interpretation. Like, say, like Smash Bros. It's a fighting game, anyone can play it. A lot of people love it. You can play casually or competitively, and you can just see it as a game of like fighting and trying to win. But then you could also like look, if you really want to, you can look at like characters like Zero Suit Samus and be like, oh yeah, you know? It's kind of up to how the person also wants to take it, a little bit, because also they did design her that way. But you could also be like, well, she's just a really cool character and she like wants to be portrayed in a certain way. That's how I kind of view it. But it is some stuff that I didn't notice until I got older.
Interesting. Okay. How about you, Marie?
Honestly, listening to Taylor as well as Ashley, my experience definitely aligns with theirs. Because growing up, I mentioned that my favorite game is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. So I would play games like that, which were so fantasy based, and I've always been a Nintendo kid at heart. So there are lots of things, I didn't notice until I got older, especially because, I grew up gay, but now I'm a trans woman. So that's like, I'm noticing a lot of things about the world that I have to take a second look at as a woman. And while everybody was talking, one of the games that I really look back on, especially right now, is lots of racing car games. Especially when, at the beginning, before, the cars go, there's always this, sexy, hypersexualized woman in a dress, waving like the board. Like, that's one thing that I like instantly think about. And Taylor really touched on it, and so did Ashley. One of the biggest topics of this conversation is hypersexualization of women. And, just hypersexualization in general, because lots of outfits that we see lots of these female characters wear, you're not going to see in real life. And also you're not going to see like bodies like that, because of proportion and just humanity and stuff like that. And yeah, so they've honestly said all of what I was thinking. I didn't really notice a lot of things until I got older, and especially I'm noticing more things because I'm a woman now, and so it's just Yeah, I didn't notice it a lot when I was younger because I just played fantasy games because yeah, I just liked any game that allowed me to escape reality and just like go to this little fun world. So yeah, for me, I didn't really notice a lot of things until I got older. And yeah, one of the biggest topics of this conversation is hyper sexualization of just characters. Do I believe it's getting better now? Yes. Because the more, you know, we have these conversations, you know, the better results we could possibly have.
Interesting. And I kind of want to like all three of you guys actually made a lot of great points, and the big theme of just having of seeing only female characters as like hypersexual objects, where obviously it gets to a point where it's like it's kind of repulsive in some aspects, to some where I feel like, why are you doing that? It's kind of like not necessary, especially in our current time. And I don't know. As someone who's been playing video games, I've been playing video games all my life, and I understood the appeal sometimes, but at the same time, like thinking back on it now, I feel like I would never remember a game because of, oh, it has like this really attractive person in it, or it has, hey, insert insert stereotype there, and it just feels. I think back, I don't know. These are tropes that are just made to hook people in to play video games, or I guess it's just anything, because that's a problem we have in society in general, where the concept of sex just comes up and just feels like, especially to the top core demographic, like, hey, come check us out, come check it out. It's you like it, and to that case, it's only catering towards male, or if anyone who's attracted to the female gender. In this case, it's very rare, and it's not even just more specific about sex, because at that point you don't see much appealing you don't see like a bunch of attractive men on video games at all. You just see only for girls, and at that point that just creates that leads into my next question of, do you at all feel as if there's like a big divide of some sort with the player base between within the video game community? Because in terms of my experience, as someone who's kind of played a lot of competitive esports, and also just playing a lot of video games with people, because I'm a big fan of social games, it definitely becomes like a weird vibe when it's like someone of the who is very different, or someone like, it could just be someone new, or sometimes it could be like, say it's a group of guys and I don't know where a girl just kind of pops up and she just gets the most attention, and that is a weird thing that happens. It's a bit of stereotype-ish, but it happens. I've seen it happen. I'm a victim to in some aspects of not even a victim. I was just a sucker who kind of like felt like, huh, what is that? And I feel like, thinking back on it now, I feel like I'm ashamed of that, and I just feel like it ostracizes whoever's just trying to have a good time and just enjoy what we're all trying to do and play video games. I guess anyone wants to jump in on that, feel free.
So I'd like to say I've had a very weird relationship with video games because of this. So again, I grew up playing video games because my dad is literally one of the biggest gamers. He loves Castlevania, Resident Evil, so I grew up watching him play games. So for me, I used that with my dad as a way of bonding, and then also I learned about video games through him. So for me, I as a child, I never saw like a divide. If anything, it was something that brought me and my dad, obviously a man, like together. And it wasn't, again, till I got in a little bit older and stopped playing video games by myself and played with other people, where I was kind of always kind of looked down upon or made fun of. And then the older I got, the more guys would just like, instead of making fun of me, they just kind of be like around me. And that kind of ruined the experience a bit for me, because I was really, really into video games as a kid. Then I got a bit more into them in high school, but then being around all these guys all the time kind of made it hard for me to want to play the way I played video games, which was casually. I like to play them for fun, as a distraction. I was never into like competitiveness and all that. I just wanted it to be like my hobby, like an activity I can do. And being around people that were really aggressive about it and like know-y all about it kind of turned me off. And actually, when I entered college and I started focusing a lot on school, like a lot more, and practicing my instrument and all that, I actually stopped playing video games for almost a year. And it kind of sucked. I was like, it was one of like the most it was amazing because it was college, it was my first year, I was learning a ton of things, but it felt kind of empty, like I was missing something. And it was kind of like end of sophomore year, start of junior year. I had a Switch that whole time, and I almost didn't touch it until like end of sophomore year when I got Breath of the Wild. And oh my God, it was just me and a Switch. And I was like, this is fantastic. Where was this my like whole year? And it felt so great. And I think part of it was because I was alone again, just playing the game and enjoying the world without having to compete against people or guys being like, you don't know what you're doing. Okay, maybe I don't. Let me figure it out. Like, I just want to have fun. And I feel like whenever I was put in situations with a lot of guys or just people that were competitive gamers, they didn't let me have fun. It was like, no, you got to do it this way or you're doing it wrong. So I feel like in that sense where I kind of feel like for guys, it's a little bit more acceptable to be a casual gamer, you know, play Call of Duty here and there for fun. But if a girl tries to be a casual gamer, we're called like fakes. And it's like, it kind of sucks because it really does turn you off. Like, I almost stopped playing video games. That's ridiculous. But I'm back.
Yay! It is
As you
weird.
should.
Yes, as you should. It's like eerie, like how similar my experience with games is to Ashley. Like, I didn't tell people forever that I played games. I am not good. Like, I have no interest in being competitive. I have no interest in being like able to execute some awesome move in a game. I just don't care about that. I play games for experience and story. And I think often there's this idea of like, there's one way to be a gamer. And if you are not that kind of gamer, then you are not actually a gamer. And also, like, why do we even have the term gamer? It's weird. And I mean, because like we don't have like people who watch movies or TV aren't called like moviers or something. Like, anybody can watch them. Why can't anybody play games and enjoy games? Just doesn't make sense to me.
It sounds like gatekeeping.
It does. And I think that's like totally the right term for it. It's gatekeeping and trying to keep the community for one particular set of people when it really should be for everybody, and everybody should feel safe in the community. And I know that often I have not felt safe in the gaming community, and it's a real shame. I think it's getting better. I'm really happy that the world is starting to have more of these conversations, you know, and I hope we only progress from here and make games more diverse, more interesting, and safe and positive for everybody.
All right. Marie, do you have anything on that?
They're honestly saying like all the things that I was gonna say, but just to add on to it, I think, because for me, I've been in situations, where I've been a part of groups, and then, a girl comes along, and the first thing, they don't really look at them as a gamer. They just look at them as, a female, and it's just like, that's cool and all, but people just want to have fun. It's like the simple fact that it's still so normalized that, oh, you're a girl and you play Call of Duty. Oh, you're a girl and you play Fortnite. No, these people are gamers. And I think the more we continue to have these conversations, the better it gets. Because I do believe it's getting better. And to continue, just inclusivity,
Mm-hmm.
that's all. That's what we need to be continuously pushing for, and as well as pushing the narrative. Like, there's like no woman gamer, there's no man gamer. everyone's just a gamer, you know. And for me personally, my experience kind of aligns with Ashley, especially since we go to the same school. But yeah, you know, I took a little time away from video games, and I'm honestly still taking time away. But it doesn't take away the fact that I still have a love for video games, and you know, I do come back to it from time to time. And one of the things that really turned me off from it was just competitive play, you know, because yeah, I played Smash for a long time, you know, everyone here in this room knows that. And what started to really make me not want to play is just the competitive nature of, you know, my friends that I know. It shouldn't be solely about that. It's not about, you know, having the most experience or being the best. It's just about having fun, you know. And I think as long as we keep that intact always, you know, at the end of the day, just to have fun, things can get better, you know, and people can get better in how we treat people, especially how we treat different genders that we're not used to playing games. It'll get better. So that's all I have to say.
It's funny how you guys are also, based on what you guys have said, I'm noticing a trend. And a lot of it comes to where a lot of the issues comes with competitive play, where most of the toxicity and the harassment or that a lot of female gamers or girls who play video games struggle with is just being taken seriously or not seen as one of everyone else. Because honestly, I don't think anyone should really be treated like that. And the key point when Ashley brought up was the moment when she started playing like a single player solo video game, her love of video games immediately sparked back. And I think that kind of says a lot on the community as a whole. But I have a question then for you guys. Do you think it's getting better now, or do you think we're still stuck in the past?
I think it's getting better. Purely in terms of representation, I think you're seeing more. You're seeing more female leads. We're going to see the first trans lead in a AAA game, like coming pretty soon, which is awesome. I played. And I'm blanking. I'll look up when someone else is talking, and I'll tell you. I didn't do my full prep. I can't remember the name of the game. I had this wonderful moment playing the Outer Worlds. There are two games from 2019, one called The Outer Wilds, one called The Outer Worlds, and they're totally different games. They're both very good, and I constantly get their names confused. Anyway, but this is the kind of like the one that's like a Fallout clone. But it's very fun, space, like open world RPG, and one of your companion characters is Ace. And it made me so happy to see an Ace character in a game, and because I hadn't seen that in a big AAA game before. So I think it's been part of indie games for a bit, not for super long, but I think now that we're seeing some of it start to infiltrate AAA, that's really encouraging.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes, I guess, into my next question then is, what do you think are good examples of representation for both, like in video games? And this goes for like either gender roles, race, ethnicity, and like any type of like sexual orientation, or obviously and gender. Sorry, I'm repeating myself, but you get the gist.
One game, well, there are many, because like I believe our society is improving in terms of all the conversations that we're having. One game that immediately pokes out to me is the new Pokemon games, because there's lots of like Black representation and good Black representation in the game, and like emphasis on good, you know, because you don't really see when you see like a Black character, it's very minimal. You know, the hair is always jacked up, you know, or just the skin's not like totally correct. But it was so encouraging and so great to see like actual representation, and that's not to discredit, any game that has, been, you know, having great Black representation. But honestly, to see like a company that I love, Nintendo, I've loved that company all my life, like have such great representation really spoke out to me because, yeah, I loved it. I love it so much. And that's
Were you talking about? I think like a certain character. I think there's a character. I know you're talking about. Is it the water type gym leader Nessa?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one person I immediately like think of, and in all honesty, like I've just seen lots of screenshots of the game, including lots of Black characters that were really of high quality, and I loved it.
Interesting. Okay. How about you, Ashley?
I don't think there's like a singular game that, at least now, that's out now, that kind of represents the world as it is now.
Agreed.
I feel like a game, honestly, it doesn't even have to be like centered around like an LGBT issue or a woman's issue or anything like that. Just like a game where it's like the real world. You're going to have characters that are different from you. Mm-hmm. Instead of having like all the characters be white and like straight and skinny, like why not have like the least you could do in a video game? And I know it takes time to develop things and design things, but like starting point, different body types in a game, because nobody looks the same.
Agreed.
Everybody's shaped differently. So like if you're playing a game, like say like an open world game where you meet other characters and it's like realistic, like I don't know, Skyrim's, like you can see the characters and all that, have them look like people you would see not just in rural America, but like maybe in the city, because the city is where you see like a ton of different types of people. It's possible people that are like developing the games come from like a small town and that's all they're used to. But perhaps, if you move to the big city to develop some softwares and make video games, you'd probably see a difference by then, So I don't personally think there's a game out there now that does a good job of representation, but I feel like a good starting point is just making games with people that look and act like people.
Yeah. Oh, and to jump back in, the game with the first AAA game with a trans main character, the game is called Tell Me Why, and it's from the developers that made Life is Strange. So, which also has some good LGBTQ representation. So very excited.
I want to play it.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. I'm excited. I'm a fan of everything they've done. So, and I also really want to echo what Ashley said. Like the game world doesn't reflect reality very well. Yeah, and we should be seeing way more diversity in characters and representation than there is right now. Just like everywhere.
So, I kind of have a few stories and a few examples that I think really would show a lot of representation. And this is just more or less like, I'm also thinking of first why there isn't, per se, aside from like American culture. I also think of like, I guess, where a lot of video games currently that are very popularized are actually not from America, as say Japan. Stuff like from Sony and the PlayStation, or even like specifically Nintendo, where you don't really see a lot of it, where over there and on that side of the world, there's not many people, specifically just in Asian cultures, where you see more obviously Asian culture, and then you see obviously like the generic white characters, because obviously it's like that's just the generic color palette that's just being used. And at first I think it was acceptable because I think not many people were really pointing to it much back then. But obviously, and now with times are changing, I think I have a big example. I've been playing this game called Persona 5, and it is just long story short, just a really good JRPG that takes place in Tokyo. And when I first playing the game, I realized there's not a single dark-skinned character like at all. And that kind of bugged me a little bit, only because I felt like I understand they're going for like a Japanese culture, but like this also takes place in modern day, and I feel like no matter what part of the world you go to, you're going to see people of different colors and races and ethnicity. And then recently, the studio that made Persona was Atlas. They recently like did a definitive version of Persona 5 called Persona 5 Royal. And one of the few touches that I noticed that they did is that with the NPCs, they actually added people of color. And I thought that was a really, it's not talked about much. It was just a really like niche little aspect change that I thought, okay, it makes it feel more alive instead of feeling like, oh, it's just people and NPCs just walk past and you don't need to interact with whatsoever. And I think it adds a little more, it brings up life into it. And then in terms of good representation, I don't know. I think I always thought it's like one of the more older good representations was Metroid, where everyone was obsessing over the first Super Metroid of, just Samus Aran going through like an entire adventure of aliens and just destroying everything, or just. I haven't played Metroid in a while, if you can't tell, but you get the gist of it. And then it comes to like, as soon as you beat the game, or at a certain point, Samus takes off her helmet, and lo and behold, it's a woman. And I just remember, like, that's like one of the biggest like jokes is like people just losing their minds that that's who it was, and it wasn't revealed until the very end. Because I think back on it now, it's like I can't tell. I think it's a good representation, and I feel like that was also trying to prove a point in some aspects.
I think it was definitely trying to prove a point. I think there's also this element with video games that's different than other mediums is you're putting yourselves in the shoes of different characters and playing as different people. And I think games have this real amazing opportunity to tap into empathy or this idea of embodied stories. And there is like such power in playing as someone who is different from you, that has a different background, different gender, different, sexual orientation, different race. And you are really like, you need to think and be them. And I think there's power in that, like some real amazing power in that. And I really wish there were more opportunities for people to play as someone that looks different than they do. But then there's also this amazing power of playing as someone that you feel like represents you as well, which is why we need such diversity in games. That I think is really missing in games. That's one of the reasons I love video games, is because I love playing as different people and like imagining I'm a different person and trying to think and act like they would. It's like, I love it.
Yeah. I want to quickly say, every guy right now, if you want to play a popular game, The Last of Us 2. You know?
Really?
Yeah, because you play as Ellie. She's not straight.
Yeah.
She's not straight. There is a lot of guys freaking out about that. But like, I don't own the game right now because I am a poor boy. But I've been watching Jacksepticeye play it, and a couple other guys. I think PewDiePie's also playing it, and Crank Gameplays. I've been watching them and their reaction to it. They absolutely do not care that like she's a girl, that she's not straight, and they enjoy the game. They're playing it. They're like, oh, if anything, they're just like, oh, she's a badass. I wish I could do this. And it also, it allows you to connect if you're a dude. It allows you to connect with women better because we're not all that different from you.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at us, we look the same, really. We just have longer hair.
So the podcast is only audio right now.
I mean, if anyone says like, look at a girl, you usually think hair because girls usually have long hair.
But just to put in, I want to say it's like, was that really a problem? Like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Some guys were just like, oh, she likes girls. Like,
what misogynistic?
Yeah. But like, I think it's really great seeing like really big YouTubers that are men play it, and like they're just like, yeah, that's fine. It's like literally normal because it is.
It literally is. Yeah, I
So
agree.
normal.
I saw
and
no problem
also-
with it. Like really, like I thought it was just a niche like character development thing. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
And I think there is still this very vocal element in the gaming world and also just in America in general who feels very threatened by any change. I mean, we saw Gamergate several years ago of people who do not like other people being represented and having a voice in the industry, and they are very loud about it. And I think that holds gaming back a little bit because you know, they're kind of a minority, but they're really loud. Um, and they're preventing video games for being safe and inclusive for others. I remember when, and this is several years ago, when Dragon Age Inquisition came out. It was the first BioWare game that allowed you to romance same-sex gender, which was awesome. And so many people were upset about it and be like, I'm a dude. I don't want to hit on another dude. Like, come on, grow up.
Hey,
Like,
if you don't like it, just don't do it.
yeah,
Exactly. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. That's why it's called a choice.
right. But they don't want other people to have choice and to see themselves because it is threatening. And I think that's holding back video games. I think a lot of AAA developers know that this is not their main base anymore. And I hope that we have moved past the years of Gamergate, but like that element is still there in video games.
And I think that's only there because I feel like people hold a lot of pride to like certain franchises where I feel like I do not want change.
Yeah.
And therefore change equals bad.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think even like when they try to introduce like a new IP, and I don't know this if whether response of whether they included like minorities or like of different sex or different orientation, if it's received backlash. I can't think of much. But I can do. But for the most part, I do think I can. I do have a list of a good change or a good reception of something different, and I think this also kind of ties a little from the comic book from the PlayStation 5 event of the new Spider-Man game, which is specifically everyone knows Spider-Man. If comic books is just a very like it's just a white guy, but then it's like then it switches over to Miles Morales, which is essentially someone who's obviously African American. And I think, if I'm correct, no, he's also
Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican. There you go. That was the other one. I knew it was a mix. And then he was recently showcased. Exactly. He was showcased in the PlayStation 5 event as the next Spider-Man game. And I think it's honestly just alone from that trailer in the game, it looks phenomenal as always. I love it. I love what they're doing as a character for him as a character. And every person, both white and people of color, they're all in love with that game right now. Just for hype, they're ready to switch over from Xbox to PlayStation just because that game. And I spoke to them. They feel like they can relate to that game, and they want to just be immersed into that world now. And honestly, that could not make me more happier.
Along with that, I feel like also something people, when developing games, have to really look into when creating a person of color is, or just like a character that's not straight white guy, you can't just also, like, if they're going to be the main character, of course, because if it's like a side character where literally they get no dialogue, okay, do whatever, like just change the body, change the hair, but if it's the main character, don't just create a game with a main character of a person of color or a woman and then just have them be the most plain character ever just for the sake of being like, yeah, we have a game that's inclusive. I don't think I've seen games like that, but thinking of like amazing games like The Last of Us 2 and like the new Spider-Man game that's going to come out, first of all, in The Last of Us 2, there's no doubt that Ellie's like a very complex person, and the character that she's with also has like their own things that they're dealing with. And considering how like the last Spider-Man game was made and all that, and how they're so fun, I don't doubt that they're not going to make him just like the old Spider-Man, but now he looks different, you know? Like they're going to make him as Miles Morales and his characteristics and his background and how his background and being a person of color has influenced the way that he views the world. Because all of us do not view the world the same. So in that way, we're not going to make the same decisions. Like if you grew up in poverty, you're probably going to be a little bit more worried and concerned about money when you get older, because you know what it's like to be there. And so a lot of characters, if you grow up with that sort of backstory, they might be more worrisome, or they might be more frugal with their money, you know? But if you grew up like, I don't know, Batman, rich guy, can throw around money, doesn't have to care much about anything, you know, like, yeah, he's a good guy at heart because he's saving lives, but he's probably more likely to make a more reckless or risky decision because he doesn't really have to worry about much besides, like, I guess, his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
I'm so glad you. Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say it's like before. I'm just say real quick. Actually, when you mentioned just like when you just don't want a character to be a pile swap, especially with like terms of Miles Morales, I was watching a bunch of interviews of the game, and the developers at Insomniac immediately brought up is one of the biggest concerns is Miles Morales is not going to be like the original Spider-Man, where he's going to have his own flaws, his own way of doing things, where it's not just a palette swap of like, oh, this is a black Spider-Man suit and everything, and that's it. He's his own individual, and I think that shows a ton of a problem. I'm speaking just because what I feel like it. It shows really good representation, and I think character writing done well. But back to you, Taylor. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I think Ashley touched on like a really big point is that, and a lot of the reason we're not seeing kind of authentic representation in games is because there's not much diversity in the game design development community. And I think a lot of the conversations we're having right now around institutionalized racism, like there are a lot of barriers that prevent people of color from joining the industry. And then when you do get in the industry, it's very hostile. And hopefully a lot of kind of reforms that are happening in workplaces and different industries. Also, like there is a reckoning within the gaming community that allows more voices to be heard in games. And then we'll hopefully start seeing more diversity in the characters on screen.
Marie, I know you've been quiet for a little bit. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I've honestly just been listening, so intently because Ashley and Taylor touched on two big points. I think, in my experience as a Black person, not only just playing video games, just like living in this world, I think, I think we're moving toward authenticity in terms of showcasing people of color and people of different gender identities, or just different people in general, because in many cases, when we are introduced to a character that is not straight, right, or cis, there are always, the stereotype that many people would perceive a person of color or perceive a person of a sexual identity to be, and I think as we continue not only to make video games, but in everything that we do that, media is just doing, authenticity, there's much more than a person than just stereotypes, and I'm really glad that Ashley brought up The Last of Us with Ellie, because yes, she's lesbian, but that's not all she is. She's this complex character that is going through these situations, and all in all, it just shows how more human a person is despite their difference. Just because a person is different doesn't mean they're just that. There's so much more to people, and I think our society just in general is moving towards showcasing more of that. We're having more inclusive shows, and even, Miles Morales is like a big deal because for a very long time, all we've known, all of everyone, if you're not a comic book reader, that is, all everyone has known of Spider-Man has just been, straight male cis for the most part, and I am so glad to live in a society that we're progressing and we're seeing more complex characters that are different, because as it should be. There are more stories that need to be told than just these stories that have been told countless times over and over again. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Awesome. And the thing is, like, I also, like, not to say it's also not bad to also use like a straight character. Like, I understand we also try to use, like, we want more inclusion. Like, I think, like, one of my favorite like, he's obviously a straight character, but he's also a person of color, is if you played Final Fantasy VII, Barrett. He is like one of my favorite people. He's like a very tough guy. I think of I don't know. I don't know what to think about it. It's like he's a very strong guy with like a gun for a hand, and he's essentially like part of a terrorist group, but he's an eco terrorist, so he's trying to help protect the earth. So he just breaks into factories that are polluting, and for the entirety game, you see him as just like this awesome, powerful like person. And then, but at the same time, like once you go with him to your home base, he actually has a daughter. And from that point, that whole like tough facade just immediately goes away, and it just shows him showing tons of compassion, and all he's doing is he wants to save the earth, so for his daughter's sake. And then you also go into his more backstory, and to that, I feel like that's just good character with depth. And I think even more of that I want developers to include like that. And this is from a Japanese developer as well, where, and like I brought up with my last point, a lot of like Japanese centric games don't really focus on people of color, but that's also not their fault, because like their culture doesn't really have much of that.
Agreed.
Per se. But I'm glad it's including more, and I think like with the Final Fantasy VII remake, it showed a lot more of what I wanted from that, and it just made me both love the character and love. It just made me feel good about myself. If that makes any sense, like while playing it, and it just you see like the world feel a little bit better. And then obviously I want to touch more on. I have another example of really good inclusion of, I guess, like same sex. It's romance, and my favorite one is from Undertale, and it's just Professor Alphys and Undyne. And I think it was a funny one because like I think when I first playing it, I just didn't expect it, and I thought it was like so adorable. And it just kind of shows like you don't she's, because you eventually throughout the game you have to go on dates with the characters, and then eventually you find out, oh, she has a crush on Undyne, and it was not even something forced. It was just like, okay, now you have to set them up, because at some points you wouldn't even think, oh wait, they're gay. It's just like, oh, okay, it's cool, it's whatever, and it ends up creating this little like adorable like ship. And I think that's how a lot of good writing should be. It's just like not forced. It'd be like, oh, look at this, it's inclusive, look what we're doing. No, just leave it in there.
Yeah.
Like, nothing really going on. Subtle.
Usually I think some of the best like ways of including that is just like the ones where it's like it's natural because you kind of don't expect it, but it wasn't forced. It's just like it's like in real life, someone goes up to you and you're like, hey, I have a crush on this person. Like it just happens, and you don't know, like you're not going to know your friend has a crush on someone unless they tell you. Mm-hmm. So if they just transfer that over to games and being like, hey, I have a crush on this person, like that's the most natural way of doing it, because that's what people do.
Mm-hmm. I guess I touch on a point because I'm sorry, I had a list of like a lot of these good representation. I think in terms of like, I guess for a female protagonist, I think of Horizon Zero Dawn, because that's, I know when you brought The Last of Us, I thought of this one because it's also a huge PlayStation property. It's because it just shows like a really badass type character of someone trying to uncover her past and trying to help the world as much as they can. Yeah. And it's literally just hunting robot dinosaurs.
I didn't actually play that. I watched my partner play it while we made fun of the game. I thought it was kind of goofy, but and there's some like weird, I think, representation of indigenous people that is I don't know how I feel about it. But I I do like the badass female character, but I feel like it's sometimes like an easy go-to. Like
Okay.
I don't need all my female characters to be badass. I want
Mhm.
my female like I want them to run the whole gamut. Like I want them to be complex. I want them to be vulnerable. I
Mhm.
want them to be human. And that's not to say badass characters like aren't great. I love a great badass character, but I think it's sometimes too easy of a go-to in video games of like we're going to have a main female character and she's going to be awesome and strong. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is true. It's like I don't know. That's a video game I love, and that's kind of the reasons why I hold near dear because it feels different per se.
I will say it is totally different. For me, it was goofy, but kudos on making something
Come on.
totally weird with robot dinosaurs.
I have a game that I can bring up as well.
Yeah.
Has anybody ever played the game franchise Fable?
Yes.
I've heard of it.
It's like I got into it when I was in high school. Fable 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. And in it you could marry and have relations with someone of the same sex.
Mhm.
And it was just natural. And that was so weird for me to grasp back then, because Fable is just about, especially Fable 3, it's just about, you're this crown prince or princess, because you can choose your sex and so on and so forth. And then you're just going on this adventure to save the world and such, and on this adventure, you can just do so many things. You name it, bake, magic, fight some trolls, it's really cool. And yeah, again, what just poked out to me, especially back then, was just the LGBT representation, and it wasn't really like a big thing. It's just it happened. You just get the option to, if you want to marry or have relations with someone of the same sex, you just can, And I think every video game should be like that, especially when it's how would I describe it? Just a very choice fit, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
I had kind of forgotten that about Fable because it was just like so natural. It was just
Yeah,
there. It's not a big deal.
yeah,
Isn't that kind of a good example though?
Yeah, it
Like,
is. It's a great example of it.
yeah.
And I
'Cause,
think because
yeah.
it's so like, yeah, of course. Of course.
Yeah, no
You
one
should be
really
able to romance whoever you
talks
want
about
to.
it. Yeah, not honestly, not a lot of people like talk about the representation of Fable, but I think it's one of the best representations by far, because everything is just supernatural. There's like no one pushing you to do this, and even when you're out with your partner and such, there's no one being weird, or there's no like mission where you have to protect your partner from homophobes or something like that. And I think that's the world we should live in.
Mhm.
It's natural.
One of my favorite things, I went through like a real deep, I played way too much of the Sims phase in my life.
Ooh.
Me too.
Yeah. Like getting into all the mods and I wasted so much of my life on that game. But one of the things I loved in Sims 3 after the game was released, they did an update to really, I think, really reflect gender more accurately as opposed to just like a male female binary, which I really loved. It gives you more choice. Like it's not perfect, but it's they realized kind of after the initial release that they needed to do more. And that's like a moment I was like, oh, yay. I'm really, I appreciate that a lot.
The Sims. It's really
The Sims.
It's really doing the most. Cause like you can date whoever you want. You can be whoever. You can be an alien.
You can.
You can be whatever you want in that game. Like
be an alien. You can be a wizard. It's
vampire.
I want to be a
wizard. Vampire. Yeah.
I've never played actually.
It's
but like I have many friends that play. It's such a cool game. It's one of those games that like you hear about and you want to play, but I haven't yet. But I will.
I used to play it on the Wii all the time.
What's super cool is the modding community is huge in The Sims. And I think the modding community is really important in games in general, of just like pushing people, ideas forward and representation forward, of being like, hey, I wish we could see this, this, and this in a game. Like, and The Sims, it's so easy to mod and add things that you see a lot of that happening, which is a lot of where like the drive to change some of the gender elements in The Sims came from.
Interesting.
Yeah, gotta put games in the hands of the people.
Yeah. Okay. I do have this weird, like, I guess, notion of like, well, in terms of inclusion, and I think it's like that is just being like being sexual orientation, where I guess it's Fire Emblem, specifically this game called Fire Emblem Three Houses, where a lot of the past Fire Emblem games have just been you get to create a protagonist, both male or female, and aside from like it's like a tactical JRPG, so it's like chess essentially, but a different aspect is you get to like talk and communicate with your team, with your like with other playable characters that you have, and it's like a little dating sim, and you get to set them up. And one of the few things that they've been adding more and more, I think, which is this recent iteration, which is like it's like a JRPG version of Harry Potter. It's funny, but you get to they've definitely been inclusive on more same-sex relationships, and I think that's what people were pushing for a lot more, like when on the previous titles. And the best part is like these characters, like it's not even like a for same-sex relationship. The way the character writing is, hey, I just actually really love like you as a person, and I want to be with you. Like one of the biggest people want to be with is constantly associated with both of a same-sex relationship, and I think that's really it's just nice to see in terms of inclusivity, because I've known and of a lot of friends who who very much like associate themselves with they like to relate themselves to same-sex representation, and seeing that in types of games and seeing them being happy about that type of representation, it's a good feeling, again, that I'm just reiterating.
Well, hopefully you won't be the only guy that feels that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this is like I want to. This is like my last game, because I'm now out of my games to talk about, is, and this is my favorite one because they talks about it's a topic of trans characters, because and this is not even going to be a bad thing, because like I can go on and on about how like censorship goes on, but you don't have time for that. Like everyone already knows that, how bad that is. But my favorite one is it's another game from Atlas. It's called Catherine Full Body. TLDR, it's literally about a game. He with someone in a relationship, he ends up cheating, and you have to play through surviving a bunch of his nightmares, whatever. Whole point is they in this version they throw on a third person, which is like a girl, and eventually throughout the game, like this is the most spoilers, I'll get into it. You find out one of the girls is not a girl, or specifically just doesn't have the same expected body part. And
she's a girl.
Obviously, the character kind of shows a very like. No. The catch is, it's not.
No, but she is.
The thing is, like, it's. I'm gonna correct that only for the sake of actually. It's just actually. The thing is that they knew that trope was happening, and they immediately came to the topic. Oh wait, no, I'm not a girl. I never said I was. And it's just like we just all assumed because of their look. That is the only reason why I'm correcting on that matter.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
We love that still.
Yes.
Yeah, that was, and I was looking into that. The whole point of that character was to mislead. And then you get to choose the character eventually, where do you want to end up with this person? And then if you do, it goes through this big trial of love isn't about wanting a different body part, who you're attracted to, or in terms of who you think you should be with, because love is all about how you feel, and eventually just I want to be with a certain person because I adore them and I want to be with them, and it just brings up the concept of just love is love.
Love stories, I feel like, are really hard to tell in video games, and video games don't tell them particularly well. And I think one of the best love stories I've ever played in a video game is an LGBTQ love story, Gone Home. It is a beautiful indie game. It was actually developed by some people who worked on BioShock 2 and were so interested in the world, not so much like the combat gameplay, but exploring a world. So in Gone Home, you play as, it takes place in the 90s in Oregon, and you're a girl who has come home from a year abroad, and you get to your house and your parents are gone and your sister is gone, and she's just looking through the house, like walking through the house, trying to piece together what has happened over the course of the year she's been gone. And a little bit of a spoiler, I feel like it's good going into this game not knowing much about it. Like the vibe of it when you first start playing is kind of like survival horror, like first person horror. But that's not what it is at all. And as you start finding your sister's like diary entries and things, you're realizing that like, oh, like your sister met a girl, like she's in love. This is her first relationship, and it is really beautiful, and the whole story unfolds really beautifully, and like you really believe like the relationship between these two girls. And it's all like set in the 90s in the Pacific Northwest, so there's like all this awesome Riot Girl music from the era. Like you can play like cassette tapes as you go through the house. It's a really beautiful game. It's not that long. I highly, highly recommend it.
Sounds like fun. I would love to get into it.
My friend who is gay, who started playing the game, I didn't tell her anything about it, and we were playing it, and she was like, she was read some of the notes, and she's like, oh, this girl's gay, she's super gay. Like, she just like could tell from like the very beginning.
Sometimes you just know.
Yeah, she's like, I know.
Dang.
Be like that.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any other examples by any chance, or I guess is it what would you want to see actually is a better question.
I was just gonna say continuous amount of complex characters that are not just straight, cis, white, predominantly male, for the most part. I just want to see some leads that don't fit into the norm, and that are not like, a stereotype, and that has, a story to tell, because as Taylor said, like honestly, my love for video games, even though I came from fantasy video games, I loved being in someone else's shoes and going on their adventure. And, I believe more representation needs to be had, because there are so many different kinds of people out here that are not straight, white, cis, and male, and that are not just this one body type, And I think we need, as a society, we're having these conversations, we're becoming more aware, of things, and lots of things are changing now. And yeah, I would just like to see more characters that are different and that have stories to tell, because I would love to play it.
I just agree with Murray, like 100%.
As much as I love me some good Yoshi's Island, because I really do, man. Like Mario Sunshine, Yoshi Island, I spent so many hours on those games. But when I was a kid, I still love playing games like that now, because I still play them. But I want, like what Marie was saying, something with a story, something with more substance, something that reflects reality a little bit more. Because it is like a movie. It's an interactive movie, kind of. But it's like, choose your own adventure, because you get to choose what you're going to do. And I like that, because what I mentioned earlier is the reason why I liked playing video games and what kind of drew me back was that it was just me and another world. And I could insert myself in that world, whether or not that character was like me or not. Because if they weren't, that's fine. I can feel like someone and something different, which I think is an amazing feeling. Why wouldn't you want to know what someone else's experience in the world is like? I feel like it makes you a lot more well-rounded.
Agreed.
You're not just stuck in your own like little world and with just your mentality. I would love to play a game where someone's so different from me, but if games can be made so well that you literally can feel what the character is feeling, and you'll be crying like when you're so say you're like on an adventure with someone and you're so emotionally invested in those characters. Like if somebody dies, if something happens, you're gonna like freak out because you've become part of the story in your own way, whether it's like as like a viewer watching the story unfold, or you actually feel like you're that character. And I feel like that can only be achieved with games that are like actually with depth, with a lot of realism. But of course, like there can be aspects that aren't real, like zombie worlds or a fantasy world, but it can still hold elements of reality where it really draws in people.
Interesting. I definitely agree with that so much. I guess before I think we're close to wrapping up. I just kind of want to say my final message is this episode has seemed very special for me because I have a lot of friends who are very much people of color and obviously in minority of LGBT in terms of LGBT and stuff, and I wanted to make sure that I'm really happy I got to learn a lot more about that topic in video games. And I'm really glad I chose you, Ashley, and Marie as guests, and also for Taylor for informing me so much about there's some stuff I didn't even know about in some games, and I'm really happy that I do now. And I hope obviously for other people will also get the chance to learn and see, and the hopes that more stuff in video games can change for the better. Because at the end of the day, we all just want to enjoy ourselves and get lost in a very good story.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
No, and
All right.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I don't want to cut you off. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, yeah. No, the conversations like this need to be had for that exact reason, because there are many things that people are unaware of, and the more we have conversations of enlightenment, things can improve. So yeah, this is great.
All right. I think this is a good way to close things up.
I do want to highlight one thing. I know in all these conversations, it's really hard to figure out like, well, what can I do as like one person? And it's always kind of read, think, talk the way we are, but also take action. And one really easy way to take action is on Itch. There is a bundle for racial justice and equality. It's like thousands of games that you can get in this bundle, and the proceeds are going to be donated to the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund and the Community Bail Fund. And you can name your price, donate what you want, and play a lot of really awesome indie games at the same time. And some of those indie games with some really awesome representation, like Night in the Woods, which has some great LGBTQ representation. So just know things like that are out there, and supporting people of color, LGBTQ people who are making games and buying their games and playing them.
We should definitely include. I'm sorry. We should definitely include that with this podcast recording. Yeah.
That's great.
Along with that, though, also just being aware of these things. Yeah. Like you've listened to the podcast, okay, but how are you going to act after this? Like, are you going to continue to be the way that you are after knowing how people feel? Or are you going to check yourself? Like, it's okay. Like, it happens once in a while. You will say something wrong and you will do something wrong. But do you apologize afterwards? Or do you think, next time I'll think about my actions and my words a little better? Or maybe I should just not bother people about their gaming habits because we're all different. It's just small subconscious stuff and conscious stuff too that you can do that do make a difference, because those little things start to become the norm. And then those pass on to future developers who then are like, oh yeah, I grew up, my best friend was like trans, I want to add her into my game, you know? Like, it's just stuff like that. Really small stuff that later grows into bigger things.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Any other final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Nope.
Awesome. All right. So Ashley, we'll start with you first. Do you want to tag yourself on anything that you want our viewers to find you at, by any chance?
You can find me on YouTube. I make Let's Play videos. I have 3 videos up right now. But if you want to watch, it's in Timco. INTIMKO. And just do random videos. Most of the games I'm playing right now are itch games. They're really fun. They're really random. But I do want to start some series. So if you want to leave a suggestion, do it in the comments.
Awesome. Marie, how about you? I know if you don't have like a social media, like any type of channel or anything, do you want to have like a final message to everyone?
Yeah, because I don't really game a lot anymore, which is kind of sad. Yeah, I'll say some final words. Just as Ashley stated, what can you take away from this conversation? Think about what you can do. Think about yourself. What have you done in the past? There are lots of things that we can learn and unlearn. And I think that's what people should take away from this. Because these are things we're talking about and addressing. It's okay if you fall into the category of even doing certain things, but just know that character development is real and it exists. Everyone can get better, and that's the thing about having these kind of conversations. We can all learn something from this, and we can all, it depends on how you want to take away from this conversation. But what I want to encourage everyone to take away from it is just, there are things that you need to be enlightened about, and that you need to be conscious of, and everyone needs to make a conscious effort to do better. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marie. That was a very nice message.
Yeah.
All right. This has been Log In Audio Out. Thank you for our 2 guests, and this has been a wonderful discussion. And I hope the audience, you got the viewers, can tune in next time for our next few episodes. For people listening for the first time, this is going to be a very different series that we're going to be doing it just on different aspects of video games. Thank you guys for everyone for tuning in, and I hope everyone has a good day. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.